would like to start asking you, what's the main challenge of education in your country, in the USA?
Well, I would say the most difficult thing is we have what we call a trilemma, a three-legged stool. That's very hard to keep balanced because one stool is for very high quality, and we all want the highest quality. The other stool is the other leg of the stool is what parents can afford to pay. And the third leg of the stool is staff qualifications. And if you raise or lower one part of the stool, it no longer is balanced. So we are, I would say, struggling with having very high quality standards, making them affordable to parents, and then also finding staff and keeping staff who are very highly qualified in the program. The compensation for staff is comparably very low to other professions.
Why do you have this situation, and what to do to deal with it? And are you already doing something about it?
Well, it's a very good question. In the United States, there is relatively little done at the national level. Most policies and regulations are at the state level. And so state by state, there are differences in the quality that they require. I fortunately come from a state, Massachusetts, in the northeast part of the country, where the qualifications for staff are relatively high. The standards for the child care programs are relatively high, but it makes it very, very expensive for parents. And so, especially in today's economy, that's a real problem. But I would say that state by state, they are making efforts to improve quality. There's really nothing more important than educating our young children. And at the national level, we have a very good professional organization called the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And that association has accreditation standards. They're voluntary, they're not required, but we all support the fact that programs should either work toward accreditation standards or already have achieved them.
You have higher levels in the north, lower in the south, or it's not?
Well, I would say in general you could make that statement. It is different state by state. I would say that where there are the highest standards in general are in the northeast and along the eastern Atlantic coast, and also then along the Pacific coast and the western part of the country. In the south, they're very variable, but they're working on trying to improve them. That is a very, very big issue. To give you an example in US dollars, I hope it will be meaningful, in the Northeast, in my state, where there are very high quality providers of care, it can cost for an infant up to $2,500 per month. It's about the same as sending a child to college. There are some centers that cost less, but they're all required to have quite high quality standards. So what you find is that parents will make other arrangements. They will use what we call family child care, where there will be typically a woman in her home that can care for up to 6 children. It's very nice. It's a home setting. There are regulations that require certain standards. And that generally is more flexible and a little less expensive. And then you have people who may have a nanny but share a nanny. And you have a lot of families who arrange their work schedules if they both work so that one parent is home for much of the week, or they take turns. We We do what's called share care, where one parent might work in the daytime, another parent might work in the evening, and they manage that way. Or, you know, if someone is so lucky as to have family members in the area, as I know it happens much in Brazil, it doesn't happen as much in the U.S. I think families are a little more separated, but certainly people will try to rely on their grandparents for the children, or aunts or cousins or neighbors who they know well. So there are many different strategies that people use in order to have a good situation for their child, but one that they can afford. We don't have very much publicly funded care. The largest system in the U.S. of publicly funded care is a program called Head Start, and now they're also adding early Head Start for younger children. That program is by and large free to parents who qualify financially, but there are a lot of expectations of families participating and being part of the program. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not intimately involved, so I'm not sure if at this point whether there might be a small fee. I believe if there would be a fee, it would be very small. In general, though, centers do not have public funding. There is some, well, there aren't really public child care centers, let me put it that way. There is some funding that goes from the national government through the states, and there are some centers that receive contracted or subsidized places for children, but they are at private centers. The cost is a very big issue. There's no question about it. The economics of childcare are very difficult for the public to understand, because on the one hand you have teachers who are not highly paid at all, but you have costs that are expensive. And the reason for that is the number of adults that you need in the classroom at all times with children. For babies, you would have 2 teachers for 6 to 8 children. So even though they don't get highly paid, you have to pay 2 salaries. And then of course you have to pay the director's salary and administrator's salary. There may be education coordinators who are working with the program, or in some cases social workers who may be available. So it becomes very expensive. And the other thing is that child care centers are open for a long period of time, typically 12 or more hours per day. And so again, even though you're not paying the teachers a lot, you have a lot of staff, and you also have 1.5 to 2 shifts of teachers and other staff in order to cover the long day. So it becomes expensive. As I said, the accreditation standards from the National Association for the Education of Young Children are much higher than what is regulated in each of the states. I can tell you that there are some states that require some experience with children. You have to be 18 years old or 21 years old. You have to have some experience. There are again, a wide variety of standards in the country. Some states require perhaps a college degree, but it may not necessarily be in childcare, or even if it's not required, organizations will look for that in a director. For teachers, there are many states that will allow you to be a head teacher if you've had 3 or 4 course level, college level courses in child development, on education, early childhood related issues. And then most states require a certain amount of training on an ongoing basis. It might be something like 20 to 60 hours of training during each year that they have to document that teachers are continuing their education. But of course there are many teachers who do have a college education, who've gone to college to specialize in early childhood or education for young children. So it's not as if we have none, we have many, but it's very difficult to attract young and bright students to go and get a college degree when they know that their salary is going to be very, very little, and in some places it's not really livable. They can make more money in a local restaurant, a food chain, or in a store than they can in teaching young children in some locations. So it's very, very difficult to find qualified staff, and also difficult to keep them because it's not well compensated. Oftentimes the benefits packages are very, very low, if at all. And teachers work very, very hard. It's a very difficult situation to be with children for 8 hours a day or more in some cases, and to be patient and lively and excited and giving each child individual attention and your very best energy. It's very challenging work. It's very exciting work, but it's very difficult work to do it well. And so you can find situations that are not as demanding, not as physically demanding or intellectually demanding, that will offer the same or more money.
Can we have an idea about the
Yes, it's variable again by the location and their particular economy, but I would say in some places teachers are making little more than minimum wage. There are many places where teachers are making, for example, $7.50 an hour. It's very difficult to learn to be motivated to learn to come into the profession and to stay in the profession when you're making $7, $8, $9 an hour. In the United States, if you follow our politics at all, you know that there is a large segment of Congress and the people they represent to say that the national government should not be too big, that we need to have a small government and services need to be located more at the state level or at the local level in the community. This kind of philosophy makes it very, very challenging because in my individual judgment, in my personal opinion, there's not enough federal money and subsidies that needs to flow through the states and the communities. And unfortunately, it's not a high enough priority. It certainly is for some. I don't mean to make that as a global statement for everyone or every state, but it's a fight. It's a battle to try to get sufficient funds to make early childhood very, very high quality and to have sufficient dollars. There are other countries in the world that do a much better job of having a supportive public system. In our country, that's just not the case.
So in your opinion, in this case, the state should put more money and be more close to the question?
I think it has to start at the national level. I would like the national level to provide more money and then to have it available for national standards. We don't even have national standards for childcare except through our Head Start program. So there's very little time and attention and money put at the federal level to support programs. I think President Obama is trying very hard. He's working to get more support for education, and I strongly support that. If you read about Barack Obama's upbringing, you know he came from very, very modest means, very modest. He was essentially raised by his grandparents. He had very little money, but there was a high value put on education, and he was very independent, and he worked hard in his life to have a college education, and then, as you probably know, he went on to Harvard Law School. He had to work very hard to make that happen. It wasn't handed to him. And also in Michelle's case, she came from modest means, middle education, middle class. Her upbringing was modest, but again, there was a real emphasis put on education within the family. She went to Princeton University and went on to law school. They had to work hard to make that happen, and I think as a result of that benefit that they've had as individuals who saw what it was like for families to struggle and to make this happen for children, to realize how important it is within their own family to educate their own two daughters very well. That has an impact.
At least they are good examples. They send the right message,
They
right?
do. They send a really strong message to families. Right now, Michelle Obama is working very hard on a campaign to decrease childhood obesity. We have a lot of issues in our country about obesity in adults, and it starts with children. And she is working very hard on a campaign to help families appreciate the value of fresh food, of shopping for good ingredients and cooking well, and for children to eat well, to get a lot of exercise. One of the things that happens in programs when there are cutbacks is sometimes there won't be a physical education teacher. And so children don't always get enough physical exercise in their daily lives. That's a real problem. She's working hard with our public school system to have healthier menus, to take away soda machines and things like that that have a real impact on early childhood as well. And I think we're working hard even at the earliest levels. Pediatricians and nurses and educators are working very hard to help families understand really healthy practices. But it is a big issue. In general, unfortunately, as we've become more of a sedentary lifestyle, you know, kids are used to watching too much TV, playing with computers, playing with TV games, and really not getting enough time outdoors, appreciating nature, getting exercise outside. Sometimes it's an issue of safety, unfortunately, but I think we can all do a much better job of giving children and families the right messages. It's very important. It's extremely important. And I think, part of the problem with early childhood is that there isn't an appreciation of how important that is. Sometimes people believe, oh, you don't have to pay teachers much money. They're babysitting. What are they doing? They're changing diapers. They're making sure children get food. It's no big deal. But the fact of the matter is that we have very, very compelling brain research now that shows that there is a tremendous amount of growth in the brain in early childhood years, and that the amount of stimulation that the brain gets is very important to how all of the physical growth of the brain occurs. So we know, for instance, that a great deal of stimulation, social interaction, stimulation between children and adults, that's very, very positive and close, and children's exposure to language, to stimulating environments are extremely important to the growth of the brain. And as a matter of fact, it's the highest period of growth in our lifetimes. So we need to take this extremely seriously and make sure that children are getting all of the stimulation that they need to have a good and bright future. Well, we're not educating young children so that they'll get to the elite universities. But we do know that early childhood is very, very important for future success. And we also have very good data that shows that early education in very high quality situations is important in many ways. Certainly in terms of educational gains, we know that. But we also know that there are other gains in life, such as the level of education that a person will get to. We know that there are gains in their abilities to earn more money in their careers. We know that there's even less crime. There are very, very positive social outcomes that are clearly related to positive early childhood. My personal opinion is that the more diversity there is among the children, the staff, and the families, the richer we will all be. There's tremendous opportunity that comes with diversity. There's a difference of thinking practices. There are cultural differences. There are strengths and very important values that come from different cultures. And I personally believe that it makes the United States stronger for the fact that we have many different people who are coming to live in our country.
The teachers need to be prepared to deal with it, a special preparation to work in that kind of environment, or it's okay, it's...
For the teachers, are you
Yes,
asking?
yes.
Well, it's a good question. I think one of the most important values that we have in early childhood is that we need to look at individual children and to understand how individual children are growing and developing, and that it is important for us to respect their culture, to understand their culture, and to integrate home and family. If you have that general knowledge and that general inclination, then you'll do everything that you can to be inclusive of families and their cultures. And so I think it takes an awareness. I think it's important that teachers are exposed to different cultural values and practices so that they can be respectful themselves. But I don't think it's a big educational problem. I think it's more a perspective and a willingness to learn and to use that learning to be highly respectful of all families.
Thank you
Prazer.
very much.
Thank you.